Morning, thank you for joining us. Today we're discussing the topic is the Flow Hive fake? Now, we've had the Flow Hive out in the wild for a decade now, but we still get the question, is this fake? Now, you tell me, put it in the comments, let me know what you think. What we're going to do is harvest some honey right now from this frame on the edge, and you tell me whether you think it is fake. Now, in order to harvest the honey, I need to grab this long key. I take the little cap out of here, I put the little tube in the bottom, and that is the only setup I need to do. Key goes in, I give that a turn, and what you'll soon see, and that's pretty easy to turn today, sometimes it's firm, what you'll see is the honey draining out of this frame right here. This is the frame the bees are on, and underneath their capping, the honey will be draining out from beneath their feet. And here it comes right now, down the tube. So today the question is, and it's a very common question we get, is the Flow Hive fake? Now, you could be forgiven. These days there's a lot of interesting, strange scams out there. A lot of AI is the latest one where they're saying, no, this can't be true, it's AI. So let's just dial back a little bit and I'll give you a bit of a background on the Flow Hive. So my father and I worked on this Flow Hive invention for a decade leading up to launch. We put our patent in 2012 on the flow frame invention. We launched in 2015, and what happened next was wild. We got 12 million US dollars of orders of our Flow Hive on our crowdfunding campaign before we had even made our Flow Hives in production. And that was the way we started. So obviously a lot of people believed that it wasn't fake and put their hard-earned cash down to get one of our Flow Hives from our crowdfunding campaign. But during that time, we got endless comments saying, no, this can't be real, often from conventional beekeepers, because our invention harvests honey in a very different way than has been done conventionally. Conventionally, you get in your bee suit, you get your smoker, you smoke the bees, you take the hive apart, you take the frames out, you take it to a processing shed where you've got a lot of expensive equipment, you've got centrifuges, decapping benches, hot knives, scrapers, buckets, sieves, you name it. A big shed full of mess and equipment in order to harvest honey conventionally. We came along and say, no, just turn a key, harvest it directly out of the hive with our invention. So we got a lot of disbelief, and you would be forgiven for not believing that it was real, because it is kind of magical. It is just coming out of the hive. There aren't many things in the world where you can turn a handle and real produce ready for the table comes directly into your jar. So it is this kind of almost futuristic sci-fi kind of thing, which you could be forgiven for thinking was fake. Now, all we've done is turn this key. That's opened up pathways inside the comb, allowing the honey to flow down to a trough at the bottom and out. So it's had zero processing. And if you have a look at that honey, it's not full of any debris, there's no wax, it's just ready for the table. So that was a real win in the harvesting in this way. We bypass all of not only the conventional processing equipment, we also harvest honey directly in a way that it hasn't touched any equipment, hasn't been processed in any way, and it doesn't need filtering. It is ready for the table. So what you get is raw, unprocessed honey directly from the hive, and it has now been scientifically proven that harvesting honey in this way retains more floral notes. So you also get a lot of people with their Flow Hives winning the prizes at the show for the best honey without even having to go through all of the processing that conventionally people did to get to a really good product on the shelf. So I can see why people think it's unbelievable. Chime in, let us know what you think. Is the Flow Hive fake? This is the frame we are harvesting right here, and we're harvesting 1 out of 7 frames. The bees are standing on their wax capping and just going about their business. Now, some of them I can see have already noticed that the honey's disappearing beneath their feet, and they're starting to chew away that wax, and they'll recycle that wax and they'll reuse it to recoat the cells, join all the flow frame matrix together again, and coat it all in wax, start depositing their nectar, and the whole process starts again. But look at that, isn't that just absolutely gorgeous? So I do have to say, I really love honey, and I love all the different flavours, and that was a real win with the Flow Hive, is being able to harvest different flavours from different frames. It's very different to conventionally, where that's kind of hard, where you're often mixing not only all the flavours from one box full of honey, but often 20 or 40 or 100 hives all together to produce honey, and it's still good honey, but not as good as having the flavour out of this frame, which is very dark and it's got the multi-tone, and the flavour out of this frame, which is bright and aromatic. And to me, I don't have a favourite honey so much as just the favourite thing to do is taste the difference between all of the amazing honeys that come in your area. So we're also going to do a bit of a dive into the hive for you. So for those that think it's a fake, we could take the hive apart and show you the inner workings. So we're going to do that with our new super lifter invention as well. So hang in there. But if you've got any questions, please put them in the comments below. Trace will read those out and we'll get to answering the questions. So while you're thinking of your questions, I'll just show you a little bit more about the flow frames. So this is our flow frame invention. Now, that's it. It's exceedingly simple when you think about it. If I take that key out of there, I can give you a demonstration of how it works. So all the parts are in cell form position like that. Give us a thumbs up if you can see the hexagon shaped cells. Now, a little bit of a 13-degree angle will give you hexagons there looking down the cells. We come along with a key and I'm going to insert it just this far, so you should see what the change is between this side and that side. So I'm going in now and ready. Notice how on this side now we have a zigzagging pathway for the honey to go down. So every cell has been split in half. And over here you've still got the hexagons. Now if I wanted to harvest the whole lot, I'd put the key all the way in, give it a turn, and now they're all in that zigzagging matrix. Give us the thumbs up if you can see the difference between harvesting and if I put that key all the way in again, and cell form position there where the bees are coating it all in wax, filling it with nectar and storing their honey in the flow frames. Now the bees come along. I grabbed a few examples for you of various different flow frames. That's the next stage where you've got the bees coating all the cells in wax. Let me know if you can see that. Can you see all of the wax? They've joined all the bridges together. They've prepared it to start storing honey. Now if I go and give you another example, this one here is the bees are further down the line. They have put the nectar all down the cells. This one's actually been in the freezer, and you can see that they put their wax capping right on top of the cell to say that honey's now ready. We're going to put a lid on it, like the lid on a preserving jar, and that's their wax capping, we call it, and that's when it's ready to harvest. Just like this frame we're harvesting right here. And you can see that the bees are just standing on their comb surface while the honey drains out beneath their feet. It is like a magic trick. I understand why people keep asking, is this fake? Now, there it is, streaming into the jar from that frame would get a big jar like this from every one of these frames. So 7 big jars out of this single Flow Hive box. So it does a lot for you. A single box full of flow frames bypasses a whole extraction shed, an expensive processing line, including your centrifuge, your stainless steel benches, all of the mess, all of the paraphernalia that goes along with that, not to mention the long weekend of work. Any questions coming in?
Yeah, amazing actually, Cedar. A lot of people are saying they're not fake because, you know, I have one or I have two. So, you know, unless they're all fakes.
They could be fake
they
as well.
They could be fake, but they're saying they've got them, so not sure. But of course, some people are saying there are fake flow hives out there, and they're, you know, half or a third of the price or whatever. And just wondering then, how do the actual fakes compare to the actual flow hive?
Okay, we've got another meaning of the word fake, rather than not
real.
Not real,
yeah.
As in a copy of.
Yes.
Yes, so out of the gate we launched on crowdfunding. We caused a massive stir in the world with $12 million worth of sales from our Flow Hive in the first 8 weeks. That did attract a lot of fakes and scams, unfortunately. So we had people selling flow hives that didn't even exist, harvesting credit cards, selling the credit cards, so be careful out there. Those scams still exist. We do our best to shut them down. Then we've got the scams of people making really poor knockoffs, and really sorry to hear that out there. We've tested quite a lot recently. 6 out of the 7 frames broke on the first actuation, and that's a pretty sad state of affairs and not good for the world, producing in this case not even single-use product. What we want to do is produce a very high quality product that is made to last many seasons. We've got people now almost 11 years in. Next month it'll be 11 years in, still with our OG original flow frames from our crowdfunding campaign. So it's our goal to make a product last as long as we can, and of course those copies, because we have the patent on our Flow Hive, our flow frames, they are of action being sold because they're not. So if you can help us with that, then you can chime in and point out where there is fakes and scams and so on. We'll do our best to limit those in the world. Getting back to the question, is this fake? It was more the question of, is this actually real or is this AI produced, which is the latest one we were getting. Now, if it is AI, then you'll notice back on our channels we've been going for 10 years, actually almost 11 like this, and if we had have had AI back then, we probably wouldn't be doing beekeeping. We would probably be at the top of some AI enterprise, I guess. So you make up your own mind, but we think this is real, but let us know what you think. We could all be fake.
Hey Cedar, can you just explain a little bit more? The cell structure of the flow frames is plastic, and what sort of plastic is it?
Okay, so that's a great question. So first of all, let's start down at the bottom box. You've got just standard wooden frames like this. The bees, they're in here. In this box, there's 10 of these wooden frames. The bees are down here building their natural wax comb, just hanging it from this comb guide. And we like to do that and promote perfectly natural. In fact, we don't like to put plastic foundation in here. We just like to have the bees draw their comb themselves. Works very nicely. We don't need the wires or wax foundation or plastic foundation in here. We don't need the reinforcement because we're never going to spin these frames in a centrifuge, which is your honey extractor, because we have our own inbuilt honey extraction system here. Now, coming to the top box, once they've filled up the bottom box full of their comb, they're a bustling little colony, they're running out of room. That's when we go and put on our flow frame invention. Up here above the excluder, which stops the queen getting up and laying eggs in their top box where we want to be collecting honey and harvesting it with our flow frames. So the flow frames themselves are made out of, and we very much care about this, there's a lot of beekeeping products in the world that are not food grade, yet people are putting them in the hive for honey collection. So we've chosen the very best food grade plastic. In this case it is polypropylene, one of the most stable plastics you can get for food containers. Now, so that choice was made for that reason, and the nice thing about it, if we have a look at this frame here, the end plates, it's all BPA, BPS free. The end plates are a BPS, BPA free plastic as well, so you get that nice clear view there. The kind that makes baby bottles. Now here, I'll just put that down on the ground. You have an example of a flow frame that's been used a couple of times, and already, if you look closely, there is a wax coating on every single surface here. And that means they're storing the nectar in a wax cup inside of our flow frame partially formed matrix. So your honey is still encased in wax and then capped off with wax, as you can see here beneath their feet as well. So I really think it's a good material choice in terms of giving a real useful function and bypassing a lot of other equipment. If we were to use metal, for instance, honey reacts poorly with metal. Even if you have honey on a teaspoon for half an hour, taste it, and if you've got a good palate, you'll notice the metallic flavour. Honey's acidic, it's reacting with the metal. And that's why when you go through conventional processing and it's spinning into that stainless steel extractor, you do get an impartment of flavour from the metal into the honey. And if you store honey in metal drums, like a lot of conventional old school beekeepers do, again, the honey will taste like metal. And I grew up thinking that was part of the flavour of honey, till I realised it wasn't, and I never put honey in metal again. So what you want to choose is a product that doesn't react with honey. In this case, polypropylene is a very good choice.
So Elisa wants to know, how often do you get to harvest each one of the frames?
Great question. So springtime is a great time pretty much all around the world, wherever you are in beekeeping, and often you can harvest all the frames and I'll fill them up again in a couple of weeks. Now if you're onto it, you can harvest them again and probably again. What most people do is just harvest a bit and leave the rest for the bees, and that's fine, but it depends whether you're trying to maximise your honey yield or not. It is a good idea to harvest a lot of honey in the springtime so that they don't put too much honey down where the queen's laying eggs. Otherwise, the hive is likely to swarm. So on average, we like to say we would harvest all of these frames at least a couple of times a year. So that would be, in this case, 14 jars like this of honey if we harvested that box twice. Now you could harvest a lot more if you were watching and harvesting as soon as it was full again. For instance, this box has sat here full for quite some time. If we had have harvested, the bees would have likely filled it up again and we could harvest whatever honey they're bringing in the last few weeks. So it really depends. Flow frames do give you that ability just to keep tapping it off when the frames look nice and full. Harvesting conventionally, I used to do it batch processing, where I'd have 40 hives or so and I would wait till they were mostly full on the supers, and then I would pull all of the honey boxes off and spend days and days going through the conventional harvesting process. Now, what that means though is you might have 30 or 40% of your hives actually full and waiting for others to catch up. And if you had have been able to tap it off with the flow frames as soon as they were full, then they might have filled it again and again. So depending on how you use our flow frames, you can potentially get a higher honey yield simply by noticing when it's full and storing honey in jars on the shelf instead of boxes on the hive in the apiary. And that allows you to run a smaller hive, and it allows you to have less equipment sitting around in the shed with wax moth and vermin making a mess of it and so on. And if you're a conventional beekeeper, you know what that is about.
Nina's tuning in. Now she's got a couple of questions. She's a fellow beekeeper, and just the first question is, how do you stop laying worker bees from laying in the honey super?
That's a good question, and very occasionally we do find some brood in the flow frames, and there's two reasons why that could be. So one is the queen could have gotten through the excluder, but perhaps there was some damage to it. Perhaps there was a way around it where there was a chew mark in the box and the queen returned from a mating flight and went above the excluder. Perhaps she snuck through when she was, if she was a very small queen. And that means you could get some brood laid in your flow frames, which obviously isn't good because we're turning the key and doing this to the cells. Now, as you say, you could also get the scenario where your hive has lost its queen, and if they've lost their queen for a while, then what can happen is the worker bees start laying eggs, but they're not fertilized, and those eggs will likely be drones, will always be drones, so male bees. So the question is, how do you stop laying workers laying in the flow frames if there is no queen? And I guess the answer is you can't stop that, but it's a very rare scenario. And what it points to, if you're seeing these little crescent moons coming out here, is something's wrong and you need to get in there and fix it. Either the queen's up top or you don't have a queen at all, and the workers are starting to lay random drone eggs all around the hive, perhaps including in the flow frames. But it's very unusual. If you see little crescent moon larvae in your jar, then make sure you do an inspection, work out what's going on, make sure you have a laying queen down here, or if the queen is stuck up there, then you just simply move all the bees down if you can't find the queen. If you can find the queen, you can just put her down. If you can't find it, you just shake all the bees down, exclude her back in place, box on top again, and you've fixed the problem.
So if you're, sometimes we'll say for people to freeze the flow frames, just wondering, Hev's wondering if you do that, does the honey in the flow frames crystallise?
That depends. This is a frozen frame right here. So I got this directly out of the freezer for this show and tell, and the reason why I wanted to get that out of the freezer to show you is to show you what it looks like when it's all waxed up and filled with honey. Now, certain types of honey will crystallize more easily. So the answer is yes, sometimes, but not always. Now, the reason why this isn't crystallized, I can see through this end plate, the reason why we put this frame in the freezer is this hive was getting attacked by hive beetles. If you have a look down here, there's one that doesn't have the top box on it. And that's simply because we noticed that the hive beetles were attacking it. We reduced the amount of area in the hive for the bees to look after. We took the frames off, we put them in the freezer. And that's a great way to store them because it kills any hive beetle eggs that might have started to get laid here, and it allows you to put them straight back on that hive when it is ready for it again. But the honey doesn't seem to have crystallized, but even if it does, the bees could eat that honey and use it to get going again. And if you do have a rare event of crystallized honey in a frame and when you're trying to harvest, usually turning the key will trigger the bees to uncap it, tear all the honey out and rebuild it again. So it's a common question and I understand why, but very rare is there any problem associated from candy honey in the hive because the bees are down here keeping the brood nest at just below our body temperature, and that warmth keeps your honey frames warm, and it is less likely to candy on the hive, and doesn't even seem to candy in the freezer, depending on what nectar the bees have used to produce the honey.
Now, Brewy's question is, Cedar, compared to conventional beekeeping, how is this easier? And also, what about maintaining the boxes against things like wood rot and things like that? Is that different to conventional beekeeping?
Okay, so that's a big question. Let's go through it.
Yeah.
How is this different to conventional beekeeping? So this is a conventional sized hive, so that's similar. And a lot of hives in beekeeping are made of wood, so that's similar. Some are made of styrofoam, some are made of plastic. We love using wood. Now, what we've done is a few things. We have our flow frame invention here, so that is the main difference between a flow hive and a conventional beehive. Is the top box, or the honey collection area, is a whole extraction room built right into your hive. So that saves you not only an incredible amount of hot, sticky, messy, hard work from the conventional way of getting in your bee suit, getting out your smoker, taking out the frames, taking them to a processing shed, putting them in a centrifuge, which might cost $3,000 just for that spinner. You've got your stainless steel benches, you've got your decapping knives, you've got your sieving buckets, all of that stuff just to harvest honey in the conventional way. And the main big difference is this bypasses it and gives you a completely different experience of harvesting honey, where you can sit here often with your friends or family harvesting the honey in this new, almost magical way, and the honey is less processed and therefore is more likely to contain higher floral notes and I guess, fresher flavour profile, which some university studies have proved. So that's our flow frames. Also gives you an advantage, and this is a big difference that we talked about earlier. You can harvest all different types of honey from different frames depending on what the bees were foraging on at the time when they filled that particular frame. For instance, this is a darker one, and you can see the difference between the two honeys. One's darker, one's lighter, and the flavour will be really quite different between the two. So the main difference is now you simply turn the key and the honey flows straight out of the box, bypassing a whole room in your house or your shed dedicated to extracting honey in the conventional way with all the processing equipment. We've also built in a whole lot of bells and whistles to make looking after your bees easier as well. So we have the pest management tray down here, which is extremely useful for managing pests like hive beetle and varroa. Now, we also have an inbuilt stand. That was very different. Beehives didn't have an inbuilt stand before. And you can adjust the height on each corner by screwing the leg up and down, which helps you find the perfect angle. Then we've built in levels in the side to give you the perfect honey harvesting angle, and also the sideways level, which is important when you're allowing bees to build natural comb, as we like to do on the brood frames. If the hive is on a bit of a tilt like that, you can imagine the comb is going to go down and perhaps join onto the neighbouring frame. So we've built in the levels. Then we have other bells and whistles here with your brass details, your windows, which are extremely useful, very different from conventional beekeeping as well. Gives you a great insight into the hive, checking on the bee numbers. You can more easily tell when the numbers are low, and you might have to get in there and see what's going on in your hive and make sure you have a laying queen. You also get to see when the honey's ready to harvest, just visually. You can see here, this one we've just harvested, it's empty. You can see here, this one's really full, and you can see here, this one's in between. So that's a really useful gauge of what's going on, and a great piece of education too being able to watch. And if you look closely, zoom in with your macro on your phone, you can even watch the bees' tongues depositing nectar. So it's a whole world of learning and education as well, which is different from a conventional white box in the field. And we've also made it look aesthetically nice. Wood is a beautiful thing to have as your hive exterior, and the gabled roof is a really nice look to have in your garden. In this case, we've got it sitting in a nice flower bed in a boat, which is fun. You can do anything you like, of course. You can just sit it like we have these hives over here, just on the ground or on a piece of concrete, top of the water tanks, nice spot. Or down here we've built a dedicated garden, and that's become a popular thing too, to really have something that's enjoyable to watch and look and check on. And I think when you put that effort into making the hive your own and something that looks nice in your garden, you tend to be proud and you tend to be present with it and you tend to watch more. And I think it provides inspiration to look after the bees and to make sure your hive's thriving. And you've got the windows here to help you understand, and the tray at the bottom to help you understand when something's amiss, and then you need to get in there. And another thing we've done, and we might show you that right now, is we've got a brand new invention to help you open the hive in a much easier way. So we're going to leave that harvesting. The bees don't seem to be coming around and jumping in the jar, so I'm satisfied to leave that there, but a good idea to cover the jar if you're going to walk away. So if we come down here, what we have is a row of beehives. Now, our new invention, the super lifter, isn't necessarily part of the Flow Hive. It's something you can use with conventional hives as well. So it's gaining popularity and has an endless stream of really touching feedback from people, because our super lifter solves a big problem in beekeeping, and that is these boxes can get extremely heavy when they're full of honey. So I've got my smoker here. I'm going to add a little smoke in the hive, and that'll have a calming effect on the bees. What I'm going to do next is leave that smoker at the entrance. Now, if you're in a high fire danger area like some parts of Australia, please put your smoker down on top of a garbage bin lid like that to limit the chances of embers falling and catching on mulch on the ground. Also, there are some times in extreme fire ban where you cannot use your smoker. Okay, it's been raining a lot here, completely different to down south where they've had a lot of bushfires. So here's our super lifter. Now, before you set that up, you want to make sure you protect yourself with a good bee suit. In this case, I like our bee jacket. I wear pants. It's just quicker to put on, but we also have the full suits for you, both in organic cotton or in this ventilated mesh. I'm a fan of the ventilated mesh jacket for the ease and speed of putting it on. Okay, 3 zips together, Velcro over the top. Now, I'm happy not wearing gloves, but I've got my gloves at the ready. If you're new to beekeeping, wear your gloves. Give yourself a gentle start in beekeeping. Here's our super lifter. It comes in a nice carry bag like that. And in here, what you've got is our super lifter and then that extension handles if you want to lift double boxes or if you want it to be even easier. I'm going to put them aside and just show you what it's like. I'll remove our caddy, which is our handy toolbox, and I'll show you just how easy it is to open the hive with our new super lifter. So first of all, you want your lifter set up like this. So it should, when you lift these handles, that's step 1, orientate itself in this position. You roll your wrists in and it should look like that. Step 2 is written on the lower brackets, and they go onto the lower load point screws. So they're the only modification you need to do to your hive is these load point screws. Now, upper brackets go up over the upper load point screws. That's step 3. Step 4's written here. Not intuitive at first, but you'll eventually get the hang of it, and once you've got it, then everything gets very easy. And look at that, I've just lifted that with one hand, in fact just 2 fingers, and that's how easy it is to crack the 2 boxes apart, which used to be a lot of annoying chiseling with your hive tool and muscling to get this box free from that box. And that's it. I extended these clickers here to make sure this was all the way up and all the way in, and all I need to do now is roll this over like this, which is so much easier than lifting it vertically, and I'm ready to beekeep. I can peel off this excluder. If you wanted to minimize that step, you could even nail it to the top box like that. Now, always look here. Occasionally you'll see the queen right here underneath the excluder. So here we are in the hive, and that's how easy it is to open up the hive, and that's a big difference in our Flow Hive, but you can cross that over to conventional beehives too if you wish. If you still want to harvest in the old way without a flow frame invention, you can use our super lifter on your conventional hives, which I can then pull a frame out to see how they're going and see what's going on. In this case, we have some naturally drawn honeycomb like we were talking about earlier. All we give them is the wooden surrounds and they draw the rest themselves. We don't need the wax and wire or plastic foundation because we're never going to put this in a spinner, because we have our own inbuilt extraction system, which is the big difference between a conventional hive and a Flow Hive. But there's a whole lot of other benefits that come along with the Flow Hive too. Thank you so much for all of your great questions. A huge thank you for those that are really chiming in and helping answer all of the questions that are flowing in. Also, let us know whereabouts in the world you are. It's really interesting to us to know where you are, and also let us know whether there is flow hives in your area. There seems to be flow hives in just about every country in the world, which is really neat. And often people in Europe, for whatever reason, complain that no, won't work here. But there's plenty of people in Europe using our flow hives with great success. If you want some inspiration, look up Jamie Oliver. Okay, beautiful. So to put the hive back together, first I might pop a frame and just check we've got a laying queen, which is always a great thing to do while you're in here. Well, we have a lot of brood there, so that's a really good sign. And we've got some young larvae down the cells, which is showing we've got a laying queen. We don't need to necessarily go and find her every time, but that's a great example of naturally drawn comb. They haven't even finished filling it out here, but they're already using it to raise their young. Drone bee, worker bee, give us the heads up if you can see the size, thumbs up if you can see the difference between the drone there and the worker bee.
So when you're harvesting honey, like we've just been doing up there on the boat hive, can you stop the flow like halfway or just take out a small amount?
Okay, no to the first one. You can't stop halfway if you've turned the key if you put the key all the way in and turned it, then you need to wait. Otherwise what will happen is there'll be a deluge of honey into the hive, which the bees are actually good at cleaning up, but you want to make sure all the honey's going into your jar. Now you can stop it a little bit early when it's still just trickling if you need to go, and the last bit the bees will lick up and redistribute in the hive. However, if you decide you are unsure about how much honey you want to harvest, then because you're unsure of whether the bees need that honey or what's happening ahead in the flowering season, which is great questions to be asking as a beekeeper, you can put the key in halfway and you'll harvest half a frame of honey. A quarter of the way you'll harvest a quarter of a frame of honey, which still gives you a useful amount to put on your breakfast table, but doesn't really take much away from the bees if you're unsure whether they need it, because after all, the honey is the bees' fuel. It's their food. They're storing it like a squirrel stores its nuts. They're storing it for a time when there isn't flowers to go and forage on. So you do need to think about what's ahead in the season. If you've got a long, cold, snowy winter coming up, for instance, you'll need a lot of honey stores for the bees to survive. So that might be a reason why you just harvest a little bit. You're curious about the flavour. You might need a jar of honey because you can't bear the thought of going and buying honey again. And you might just put the key in a little way, harvest your jar of honey and leave the rest for the bees. So really quite versatile like that as well. And using it like that provides very little disturbance to the bees, just harvesting one frame or part of the frame and leaving the rest. So our excluder goes back on like this, and we can seize that moment where there's no bees. This is the only spot it's landing. The box is landing right here. So you line that up, beautiful. And now you've got this beautiful controlled closure, which wasn't available before in beekeeping with Langstroth hives. Langstroth is the name of these hives that are vertically stacked boxes. Okay, so the excluder's in place, we've got that lined up. Now you can use your smoker and your bee brush just to move bees out of the way, and you're having a look, there's a bee right there. We don't want to squash it, so we'll smoke that one out of the way, and then you've got this slow as you like closure. So of course you can close it quickly if you like, but you can really close it slowly if you want to, and pay a lot of attention into where the bees are and see if you minimize squashing bees. And that's become a really great piece of feedback as well. People say amazing for opening the hive. So what I didn't expect was the real benefit of a controlled closure. Normally you're waddling up with what could be 30, 40 kilograms, a heavy box, and all you can do is kind of drop it vaguely in place and then try and square it up. And that process, you kind of get used to it, but you smash a whole lot of bees usually dropping it onto a hive like that. Where you have the option here to really slowly lower the box down and in a gentle way put that super back on the hive. And then we've designed it for speed, we've designed it for ease. Once you get the hang of it, it's very quick and very easy to rip through your hives and do some of the things that were actually quite daunting in a way. We now find people are inspired to open their hives and have a look when they have one of these, which is great. And I find myself, if I don't have one of these around, the thought of, even though I'm strong enough to lift all the top boxes off, the thought of doing that often makes me not want to do it. But when you have this, you're like, oh, I'll just have a quick look. And all of a sudden you're in there having a quick look, moving along the hive. And also, there might be cases where, let's say you had to do a whole lot of requeening. Let's say you're a small scale commercial beekeeper, and you could even just not even lift the box off. You just crack it open that little bit and pop your queen in and close it again. So very fast to do some of the things in beekeeping with our super lifter. Let us know what you think. Let's go back and see what's happening with our honey harvest. Now, I hope that this gives you a good idea of whether we are fake and AI generated or not. We'd certainly be, I mean, you tell us, we get that feedback every week that, hang on, this can't be real, this can't be possible. We understand why, because without taking the box apart, you've got your full jar of honey, while the bees have hardly noticed what's going on. If you look in the side window, you can see the bees are just chilling, doing their thing. Some of them have noticed, some of them are chewing away the wax capping, some of them have started to rebuild the cells, and the whole process will start again. It is kind of like magic and kind of hard to believe. I still get a real kick out of watching the honey pour out. And So do a lot of people, but look at that. Perfect big 3 kilograms of honey out of a single flow frame. So therefore, if we harvested the rest, you'd have 21 kilograms or 7 of these jars of honey, and that is absolutely extraordinary. Apis mellifera, the European honeybee, is, in my opinion, an extraordinary species. The amount of honey they can produce is wild, almost defies physics. They're flying out of the hive, beating their wings at 240 times a second. They can fly 10 kilometers or 6 miles and bring back a load almost their entire body weight again into the hive. And they'll do that multiple times a day in the short little 4-week life of a worker bee. Each bee that you see flying in and out might only produce 1/4 of a teaspoon of honey in its entire foraging life. And look what we have. A single hive like this could visit 50 million flowers in a day, and that is absolutely extraordinary, and it's why Apis mellifera, the European honeybee, has been taken all around the world wherever humans have gone with their agriculture, because they are extreme pollinators. We don't have anything else in the world to do that for us. Extremely important species to humans and their agricultural pursuits, and a lot of the things we need. And you might say, yeah, but we can just live on potatoes because they don't need pollinating. And while that's true, when you start saying, well, you probably won't have coffee, you probably won't have wine, you probably won't have chocolate, and you name those 3 things and people are worried. We actually need the Apis mellifera, the European honeybee, to be looked after, to be cared for by enough beekeepers in order to have enough bees to keep the whole system going that we do actually depend on. And amazing little pollinators for your own garden as well. We've been in interesting times here in Australia where the bees have disappeared temporarily for a year or so. My father-in-law was hand pollinating his pumpkins to get a pumpkin crop. And it goes to show the importance of the honeybee and the reverence that humans have always had for the honeybee for the reasons of pollination and the extreme amount of this beautiful stuff we call honey that they make. Thanks for watching. Thanks for all of your great questions. Same time next week, tune in, let us know what's on your mind, and big thank you to all of those chiming in and answering questions in the thread. So good to see a global community helping each other in beekeeping. And if you do want an online course, if you really value high quality video training, have a look at thebeekeeper.org. It stands out in the world. We've got experts from all corners of the globe to put in amazing training material, and it's also an amazing fundraiser. It's free to try, but an amazing fundraiser for the bees. And we're really proud at all of the things we've supported with funds from thebeekeeper.org. So have a look at that if you do want a high quality video training course. Thanks for watching. Same time next week. We'll see you then. I'm going to close the frame now just by putting the key in the top. If you can, leave it for a minute or 2 while you pack up, and that will make sure all of your flow frame parts go back into the cell formed position. See you again next week.